I received a request to provide commentary on a video discussing the topic of whether the Bible condones rape. However, I prefer not to comment directly on videos, but instead provide you with the necessary information that empowers you to form your own opinion. That's precisely what I aim to do in this video. The question, does the Bible condone rape, is indeed an intriguing one, but perhaps a more insightful question would be, what was the perspective of rape in the cultural and historical context in which the Bible was written? This question shifts our focus to the ancient Near East, the world within which the Bible was created. Now, by exploring this angle, we can gain a deeper understanding of the societal norms and values of that time, which can shed light on how issues like rape was viewed and addressed. So let's do that. Yes, the Bible or the biblical text acknowledged the issue of rape. While the perpetrator undoubtedly deserved punishment, the behavior of the woman during the incident often came under examination, particularly if she was engaged or married. This perspective is reflected in Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 to 27, where it states, "If there is a virgin girl betrothed to a man, and another man finds her in the city and lies with her, you shall take them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall pelt them with stones, and they shall die. The girl, because she did not cry out, even though she was in the city, and the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So shall you clear away the evil from among you." 25. "But if a man finds the betrothed girl in the field, and the man overpowers her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. Whereas to the girl, you shall do nothing. The girl did not commit a sin deserving of death. For just as a man rises up against his fellow and murders him, so is this case. Because he found her in the field, the betrothed girl had cried out, but there was no one to save her." Now, the important phrases or words that we need to pay attention to is virgin, betrothed, in the city. She did not cry out. In the field. Overpowered her. Cried out. These phrases or words are important to understand the law as it's presented. The legal framework of the time was meticulously designed to leave no room for mitigating circumstances for the offender. It was immaterial whether the woman was merely betrothed or a virgin, because in the eyes of the law, a betrothed woman was deemed equivalent to a married woman when it came to any other man than her fiancé. So even if she's betrothed, she is off limits to any other man. The woman, however, bore the burden of proof to show through her actions that she was not a willing participant in the sexual encounter. Let me repeat that. The woman bore the burden of proof to show through her actions that she was not a willing participant in the sexual encounter. She was expected to vocally resist and seek help. I repeat that again. She was expected to vocally resist and seek help. If the assault occurred within town limits, it was assumed her cries for help would be heard. Conversely, if the incident took place in the isolated countryside, the presumption was that despite her resistance and cries, no one was within earshot to give her aid. So it means that if she was in the countryside, it is automatically assumed that she did cry out. But if she was in town, it was not automatically assumed that she cried out. Automatically, they are saying that she did not cry out. Now, sitting in Las Vegas on the 3rd of July, 2023, I do have concerns with how this law is framed and interpreted. This interpretation of the law places an undue burden on the woman to prove her resistance during a sexual assault, which can be seen as problematic, extremely problematic. Firstly, it assumes that resistance is a clear-cut and universally understood concept, which is not the case. Because we know that resistance can manifest in many ways and not always as a loud cry for help, as the biblical text is trying to tell us. This presumption overlooks the reality of the freeze response. Some people freeze, which is common among victims of trauma. Secondly, the location of the assault should not determine the validity or severity of the crime. It should not. The assumption that an outcry in town would be heard while one in the countryside would not only oversimplifies the complexities of such situations, but also unjustly allocates blame. It ignores potential scenarios where a victim might be silenced or frightened into submission, regardless of the location. Lastly, this interpretation perpetuates a culture of victim blaming by placing the responsibility of proving innocence on the victim. Rather than focusing on the perpetrator's actions, it shifts the spotlight onto the woman's behavior, reinforcing harmful stereotypes and potentially discouraging victims from coming forward. It's crucial to note that the onus should always be on the perpetrator, not the victim. But here, the biblical text seems to put the onus on the victim and not the perpetrator. So, this is my position on the law that we've just read. And my position happens to be supported by Ramban, Nachmanides, who takes this argument a step further in his commentary. He advocates for a more understanding perspective, suggesting that there must be room for recognizing other forms of female resistance, irrespective of whether they are audible or not. This shift in interpretation acknowledges the various ways in which a woman might resist in such traumatic circumstances, providing a more nuanced understanding of the situation, beyond the binary of crying out or staying silent. So yes, I do agree with Ramban, Nachmanides, on his position. However, in later interpretations, the rabbis found cause to rather critique the girl for leaving her house alone, unaccompanied, or unsupervised. Rashi, commenting on Deuteronomy 22:23, posits that, and I quote him, a breach in the wall is an invitation to a thief. If she had stayed at home, this would not have happened to her. An interesting statement, a gross one as such. This perspective raises several issues. It's important to note that it once again shifts the blame onto the victim, suggesting that her actions of venturing out alone were what led to the assault. This interpretation dangerously implies that the responsibility lies with the woman to prevent such incidents by restricting her own movement and freedoms, rather than addressing the action of the perpetrator. I disagree with Rashi. I totally disagree with Rashi. Moreover, using the analogy of breach in the wall, that's what Rashi writes, invites a thief, unduly compares a woman's autonomy to the vulnerability that invites assault. This analogy is flawed and harmful as it reinforces a culture of victim blaming and oversimplifies the complex issue of sexual assault, reducing it to a matter of mere opportunity rather than a violation of consent and personal autonomy. Again, now sitting in Las Vegas on the 3rd of July 2023, I do have concerns with how this law is framed and interpreted. Well, Rabbi Akwetey, reality check. The law was not written for someone sitting in Las Vegas on the 3rd of July 2023. It was not. It was written to someone sitting in the ancient Near East. So what any serious Bible student need to do is place the biblical text in its ancient Near Eastern context. So when we do that, and we compare biblical laws with those of the ancient Near East, we see that many elements from the Bible were well-established rules, deeply rooted in a long legal history found in ancient Near Eastern law collections. It's not new at all. For instance, the concept of a betrothed virgin wife is not new. It dates back to the end of the 2nd millennium BCE, as shown in the Amaah laws. Let's look at 6. This law declares, if a man forcibly deflowered the virgin wife of a young man, that man should be killed. Again, if a man forcibly deflowered the virgin wife of a young man, that man should be killed. A similar scenario is depicted in the Shunana laws, which dates back to the old Babylonian period. We're looking at 1900 BCE, which also deals with a betrothed virgin wife, but introduces another element, the parents' consent for the marriage to be legally valid. The law states in 26, if a man presents a groom's gift for a man's daughter and another person, without seeking her parents' permission, forcibly takes her and deflowers her, it is a capital offense. He shall die. I repeat it again. If a man presents a groom's gift for a man's daughter and another person, without seeking her parents' permission, forcibly takes her and deflowers her, it is a capital offense. He shall die. Now we come to the laws of Hammurabi, which dates to the 1800 BCE. Reiterates this basic law, but adds that the victim should not be blamed. We're looking at Law 130. It states, if a man has overpowered another man's wife, who did not yet know a male, and who was still living in her father's house, and he lay with her, and they catch him, that man shall be put to death, but that woman goes free. I repeat it. If a man has overpowered another man's wife, who did not yet know a male, and who was still living in her father's house, and he lay with her, and they catch him, that man shall be put to death, but that woman goes free. So these laws that I have showed you show that the themes we find in biblical laws have deep roots in the legal systems of the ancient Near East, reflecting long-standing societal norms and values. So the question of whether the Bible condones something or not should be placed in its original context and dealt within that context. These early law cases clearly indicate that the female was taken by force, but they do not discuss her response to the attacker or the location in which it took place, as the book of Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27 does. However, the Hittite laws, which dates to 1400 BCE, does present a similarity to that of the book of Deuteronomy. Hittite law 197 is similar to Deuteronomy 22 verses 23 to 27, and at the same time, exactly not the same. So it's an approximation of Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27, with its distinction between town and field. What does the Hittite law 197 tell us? It says, if a man seizes a woman in the mountains and rapes her, it is the man's offense, and he shall be put to death. But if he seizes her in her house, it is the woman's offense. The woman shall be put to death. If the woman's husband finds them in the act and kills them, he has committed no offense. Quite interesting. Let's read it again. If a man seizes a woman in the mountains and rapes her, it is the man's offense, and he shall be put to death. But if he seizes her in her house, it is the woman's offense. The woman shall be put to death. If the woman's husband finds them in the act, that is, in his house, and kills them, he has committed no offense. This Hittite law appears to draw a more nuanced distinction than Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27, differentiating between house and field rather than town and field. So house and field in contrast to town and field. Understanding Deuteronomy can shed light on the logic underpinning the Hittite law 197. The latter doesn't explain why a woman in the mountains should face different treatment compared to one at home. The Hittite law does not explain that. Additionally, the Hittite law contemplates a scenario where an enraged husband encounters the couple in the act at home and kills them both, essentially taking justice into his own hands. Normally, the expected recourse would be seeking legal remedy through the courts, but he does not. He takes matters in his own hands and he is not guilty. Interestingly, there is no equivalent scenario involving a husband's action in the biblical text. So we do see similar laws as we see in the book of Deuteronomy here in the context of the ancient Near East. Laws that predate what we have in the book of Deuteronomy, chapters 22, to be specific here, 23 to 27. Okay, now let's deal with the woman's behavior of crying out during the incident. It seems that there was a common societal expectation for women who were victims of sexual assault to demonstrate their resistance by publicly expressing their distress. This means that society expected these women to make their struggle known loudly and openly as a way to show that they did not consent to the act. Now, we have Middle Assyrian laws, which date to 1400 BCE, which details a situation where a woman was assaulted while walking in the town. And despite her resistance, no one was there to help her. We're looking at Middle Assyrian laws A12. The law states, if a man's wife was walking down the street and another man tried to force himself on her, saying, I want to sleep with you, and she refused, suppose she has always been faithful and he overpowered her. In that case, whether they catch him in the act with the man's wife or witnesses confirm that he forced himself on her, they shall execute the man. The woman will not be held accountable for any wrongdoing. As usual, I want to repeat it again. If a man's wife was walking down the street and another man tried to force himself on her, saying, I want to sleep with you, and she refused, suppose she has always been faithful and he overpowered her. In that case, whether they catch him in the act with the man's wife or witnesses confirm that he forced himself on her, they shall execute the man. The woman will not be held accountable for any wrongdoing. This law doesn't criticize the woman for being out in public, number one, nor does it demand that she must cry out for help like we have in Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 to 27. However, her clear rejection of the sexual advances is necessary to absolve her from any claims of involvement. So her clear rejection of the sexual advances is necessary. Additionally, her past behavior also plays a role. Specifically, it's important that she's known for her chastity. So her prior behavior, in this case, we are told plays a role. Specifically, it's important that she's known for her chastity. Interesting. Another Middle Assyrian law, A23, highlights another expected reaction from women who have been raped. They must not hide the incident. If they don't reveal what happened, they would potentially face accusations of being complicit in the act. Again, they must not hide the incident, according to Assyrian law 23. They must not hide the incident. If they don't reveal what happened, they could potentially face accusations of being complicit in the act. This law sheds light on Potiphar's wife's behavior in this situation with Joseph. This need for the victim to bring attention to her traumatic experience can be seen in the story of Potiphar's wife and Joseph. When Joseph rejected her advances, she felt compelled to concoct a false narrative about him trying to sexually assault her. By doing so, she ensured that there was a record of her supposedly crying out to fend off his unwanted advances. We read that in Genesis 39. And it came about on a certain day that he came to the house to do his work, and none of the people of the house were there in the house. So she grabbed him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. Now it happened, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, that she called to the people of the house, and she spoke to them, saying, "Look, he brought us a Hebrew man to mock us. He came to me to lie with me, but I called loudly." And it happened that when he heard that I raised my voice and called out, he left his garment beside me, and he fled and went outside. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home, and she told him the same thing, saying, "The Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to me to mock me. And it happened when I raised my voice and called out that he left his garment beside me and fled outside." So according to the Middle Assyrian laws, it is expected for the woman who have been raped to not hide the incident. If they don't reveal what happened, they could potentially face accusations of being complicit in the act. Knowing this, Potiphar's wife, even though she concocted a false narrative, she does cry out. She does what was commonly known in the ancient Near East. Now, this notion, while it may reflect the historical context of the Middle Assyrian laws and the story of Potiphar's wife, can be criticized from a modern perspective. The expectation for the victim to immediately disclose the incident or risk being seen as complicit is problematic. Extremely problematic. It fails to acknowledge the complex range of reactions individuals may have in response to trauma, which can include shock, denial, fear of retaliation, or not being believed. The biblical text does not consider that. The Middle Assyrian law does not consider that. The laws from the ancient Near East, they do not consider this. But what we've seen is that Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 to 27, provides a glimpse into the historical context of the ancient Near East, which was predominantly patriarchal. However, when viewed through a modern lens, it can attract criticism. This passage from Deuteronomy represents a time when societal norms were largely controlled by men. Does it place an unfair burden on victims of sexual assaults? Yes, it does. From a modern man sitting in Nevada making YouTube videos and debating the topic on social media. Does it place an unfair burden on victims of sexual assaults from the ancient Near East? Probably one from the ancient Near East will say no. While these laws may offer insight into historical societal norms, they are not reflective of contemporary understandings of consent, trauma, and victim rights.